Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a story from Her Silent Revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
I walked into my brother's engagement party after 10 years of rejection. The bride sneered, "The stinky country girl is here." She thought I was nobody, the sister who left broke and desperate. She didn't know I owned the hotel. She didn't know I'd built a fortune she couldn't imagine. And she had no idea I brought something with me that night, a truth that would destroy everything she'd worked for. Her perfect world was about to shatter. Thank you for being here. Quick question before we start. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Disclaimer: this narrative contains creative storytelling elements. Any resemblance to actual individuals or locations is coincidental, though the underlying lessons remain completely authentic. The moment I stepped into the ballroom at the Magnolia Grand Hotel, I knew this was going to be a long night. Crystal chandeliers hung from 20-foot ceilings, casting warm light over marble floors that probably cost more than most people's houses. White roses and magnolias spilled from massive arrangements on every table. A champagne fountain, because apparently one bottle per guest wasn't excessive enough, bubbled in the corner near a string quartet, playing something classical and forgettable. The whole scene screamed Southern elegance, with a side of, "Look how much money we have." I recognized every detail because I'd approved every one of them. The chandeliers, I'd picked those out 3 years ago when I bought this place. The marble imported from Italy, my decision. Even the magnolias were my touch, a nod to the hotel's name and the city's iconic flower. But tonight I wasn't here as the owner. I was here as the sister nobody wanted at the party. I smoothed down my blazer, simple black expensive but not showy, and scanned the room. Guests clustered in small groups, champagne glasses glinting in their perfectly manicured hands. Kenneth stood near the center of it all, my older brother, looking like a man who just won the lottery. Next to him, wrapped around his arm like a designer accessory, was Miranda Ashford, his fiancée, the reason we were all here. She was exactly what you'd expect. Blonde, beautiful, polished to a shine that probably required a team of professionals. Her white cocktail dress fit like it had been sewn onto her body. Diamonds, or what I assumed were diamonds, sparkled at her throat and wrists. She threw her head back, laughing at something one of her bridesmaids said, and even from across the room I could see how calculated it all was. The laugh, the toss of perfect hair, the way she touched Kenneth's arm, just so. I was watching this performance when I heard her say it. "Oh, wonderful." Her voice carried across the marble floor like she meant for everyone to hear. The trailer park girl actually showed up. The bridesmaids, 3 women who looked like they'd been grown in the same laboratory as Miranda, dissolved into giggles. High-pitched mean the kind of laughter that takes you right back to middle school and every moment you weren't good enough. Miranda didn't even look at me when she said it. That was the part that stung most. I wasn't worth the effort of eye contact. Just a problem that had wandered into her perfect evening, something to be dismissed with a whisper and a laugh. I stood there frozen near the entrance. My invitation last minute, probably sent out of guilt, clutched in my hand. For a second, I was 18 again, standing in my childhood home while my mother told me I wasn't special, standing outside the family Thanksgiving dinner while my mother, Judith, closed the door in my face, standing invisible in every room I'd ever entered in Hartwell, Georgia, the town where I'd grown up knowing I would never measure up. But here's what Miranda didn't know, what none of them knew. Every crystal chandelier above her head mine. Every piece of antique furniture she was probably judging as trying too hard, I'd selected it. Every square inch of Italian marble beneath her designer heels, I'd paid for it. The champagne she was sipping while she mocked me, that flowed from my budget. The Magnolia Grand Hotel wasn't just where my brother was having his engagement party. It was my hotel, my flagship property. The crown jewel of Cooper Hospitality Group, which I'd built from absolutely nothing over the past 10 years. They all thought I'd fail. My mother told me I would. Kenneth laughed when I said I was moving to Savannah to work in hotels. The guidance counselor at my high school suggested community college and realistic expectations. Even the lady at the bus station looked at me with pity when I bought that one-way ticket like she was watching someone walk off a cliff. But I didn't fail. I worked. I watched. I learned. I built something they couldn't even imagine. And I did it quietly because I'd learned early that being underestimated was sometimes the best advantage you could have. Tonight, standing in my own ballroom while my future sister-in-law called me trailer trash, I felt that old familiar burn, the anger, the hurt, the part of me that still, after all these years, wanted them to see me, really see me. But I didn't come here for validation. I didn't even come here for revenge, though I'd be lying if I said the thought hadn't crossed my mind. So I straightened my spine, ignored the burning in my chest where my heart used to be, and walked deeper into the party. Miranda's laughter followed me across the room, sharp and bright and completely unaware. By midnight, I thought that whisper was going to cost her everything she'd ever wanted. I caught the eye of Graham Reed, my general manager, who stood near the service entrance coordinating the catering staff. He gave me a subtle nod. Everything was running smoothly. No one suspected that the woman in the simple blazer, the one who'd just been publicly humiliated, was actually the person signing everyone's paychecks. I spotted Judith across the ballroom laughing with a group of women I didn't recognize, probably friends from her book club or garden society or whatever organization she'd joined to feel important. She hadn't even noticed I'd arrived yet. Typical. Kenneth stood next to Miranda looking like a man who'd won the lottery. He had no idea what he was holding, had no idea what was coming. What Miranda didn't know, what nobody in this room knew, was that I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to prevent something terrible from happening. My name is Maureen Cooper, and I grew up as a ghost in my own family. Standing here in this ballroom, watching Judith hold court with her friends, watching Kenneth bask in the glow of his beautiful fiancée, I was struck by how little had changed. I was 31 years old. I'd built an empire. I'd clawed my way up from nothing to own 5 hotels and 2 restaurants across Georgia and South Carolina. And I was still invisible to them. Some wounds, I guess, never really heal. They just learn to lie quiet until someone pokes them. I was 12 years old when I won the state science fair. 3rd place middle school division. I'd built a model of the solar system that actually moved planets rotating on axes. I'd calculated myself with math I'd taught myself because my teacher said it was too advanced for 6th grade. I spent 3 months on that project, stayed up past midnight most nights adjusting orbits, painting details on Jupiter's storms, making sure Saturn's rings tilted at exactly the right angle. I came home with my trophy bronze, but still shiny, practically vibrating with pride. Mom was in the kitchen. Kenneth was sitting at the table. Dad was in his usual spot in front of the TV. "Mom," I said, holding up the trophy. "Look, I won 3rd place out of the whole state." She glanced up from whatever she was cooking. "That's nice, honey." Then turning to Kenneth, "Your brother has some real news. Tell her Kenneth." Kenneth, 15 at the time, already developing the smug expression he'd perfect by adulthood, grinned. I got promoted to assistant manager at McDonald's. And just like that, the kitchen exploded. Mom dropped everything to hug him. Dad actually got up from his chair. They acted like he'd been named CEO of a Fortune 500 company instead of getting a $1 an hour raise to supervise other teenagers flipping burgers. I stood there with my trophy watching my accomplishment dissolve into background noise. "Maureen, honey, could you set the table?" Mom asked, already turning back to Kenneth. "We're celebrating your brother's success tonight." I set the table. I ate dinner in silence while they talked about Kenneth's bright future. And later, when I was supposed to be asleep, I heard Mom on the phone with her sister. "Oh, Kenneth's doing so well, getting promoted already. Real achievement in the real world, you know. Not like Maureen's little hobbies." Little hobbies. I'd beaten out 300 other students. But Kenneth got a new job at McDonald's, and I had little hobbies. 4 years later, I came home with a different kind of news. I got accepted to Georgia State. I told them, bouncing on my toes in the living room. Full scholarship, full ride, they're paying for everything. Judith. I'd stopped thinking of her as Mom somewhere around my 14th birthday, looked up from her magazine. Her expression wasn't pride, it was something closer to annoyance. University. She said it like I'd announced plans to join the circus. That's 4 years. Who's going to help around the house? Your brother needs someone to cook for him when he gets home from work. I stared at her. I got a full scholarship. I heard you. I'm just saying, Maureen, you need to think about your family. Not everyone is meant for university. There's a community college 20 minutes from here. You could live at home, help out, still get an education. But I got into Georgia State with a scholarship. Well, she went back to her magazine, you'll do what you want anyway. You always have been selfish like that. Selfish, because I wanted to accept a full scholarship to a 4-year university, because I didn't want to stay home and cook meals for my adult brother, who was perfectly capable of microwaving his own dinner. Gerald Dad sat in his chair and said nothing. He was good at that, saying nothing. Letting Judith shape the family however she wanted, letting Kenneth coast on her favoritism, letting me twist in the wind without a single word of support. I went to my room and cried into my pillow so no one would hear. The guidance counselor at school suggested I look into realistic expectations when I told her I wanted to study hospitality management. Maybe start with community college. She said, echoing Judith almost word for word, work your way up, girls from towns like Hartwell. She didn't finish the sentence, but I heard it anyway. Girls like you don't make it out. I graduated high school at 18 with honors, got that scholarship, packed one suitcase with everything I owned. Judith found me at the door. So you're really doing this? It wasn't a question. Her arms were crossed, her face set in that expression I knew so well. Disappointment, judgment. The look that said I was once again failing to be what she wanted. I'm taking the scholarship, I said. Fine. Her voice was flat. Leave, just like your father's sister did. We don't need you. I picked up my suitcase. You know what? Judith stepped closer. Her perfume, something floral and cloying, made my eyes water. Or maybe that was something else. Girls like you don't make it. You're not special, Maureen. You never were. Girls like you, not special, never were. Those words followed me out the door, down the driveway, all the way to the Greyhound station. They followed me through 2 years of eating ramen and sleeping on friends' couches. They whispered in my ear every time something went wrong, every time I wanted to give up. They were supposed to break me. They didn't. I came back to the present moment, the ballroom, the chandeliers, the sound of champagne glasses clinking. Judith stood across the room laughing at something one of her friends said. She still hadn't noticed me. Probably wouldn't even if I walked right up to her. Kenneth had his arm around Miranda, looking for all the world like a man who had everything figured out. He'd never had to fight for anything, never had to prove himself, never had to leave home with $350 and a bus ticket, because staying would have crushed him into something small and bitter. The irony burned. Here I stood in my own hotel, one of 5 I owned, invisible to the family who'd spent 30 years making sure I knew my place. I left Hartwell that day with $350 a bus ticket and a promise to myself I would make them see me. 10 years later, I owned 5 hotels, and they still didn't know I existed. That $350, it lasted exactly 2 weeks. 2 weeks of gas station coffee and dollar store ramen. 2 weeks in a studio apartment I shared with 2 other girls sleeping on an air mattress that slowly deflated every night. 2 weeks before my bank account hit zero and I had to choose between eating or keeping the lights on. I chose eating. I've always been practical that way. The first hotel job I got was scrubbing toilets at a budget chain off Interstate 75. $6 an hour, no benefits, and a supervisor who called me sweetheart in a way that made my skin crawl. I worked the early morning shift, 5 a.m. to 1 p.m., so I could take classes at the community college in the afternoons, business administration. Because if there's one thing growing up poor teaches you, it's that you need more than dreams to survive. You need a plan. I learned everything I could. How to fold hospital corners on hotel sheets, how to spot a bedug infestation before it spreads, how to smile at guests who treated me like I was invisible, how to read a profit and loss statement, how to calculate occupancy rates, how to manage inventory without waste. By my second year, I'd moved up to front desk. By my third, I was running the night shift at a mid-tier hotel in Macon. I was 21 years old, making $9 an hour, and I felt like I was on top of the world. That feeling didn't last long. Years 4 through 7 were a blur of assistant manager positions, 60-hour weeks, and a savings account that grew with agonizing slowness. I wore the same 3 outfits to work rotated on a schedule. I cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror. I said no to every invitation, every night out, every small luxury that might have made life feel less like an endurance test. I watch my former community college classmates graduate, get married, start families. I watch them post vacation photos and engagement rings and baby announcements on social media. I watched them live lives that looked warm and full and connected. I was 25 years old and I was so lonely I could barely breathe. Year 8 almost broke me. I was managing a boutique hotel in Charleston when I hit the wall. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I was in the office doing payroll because our accountant had quit, and we couldn't afford to replace her. My back hurt. My eyes burned. My savings account had $43,000 in it, money I'd scraped together over 7 years, and it felt both like everything and nothing at all. I pulled up Hartwell, Georgia on my phone, scrolled through Facebook photos of my brother's life. Kenneth had just gotten promoted to shift supervisor at the factory. My mother had posted about it 3 paragraphs of pride complete with photos. I had a college degree and managed a hotel with 40 rooms. She'd never mentioned me once. I almost quit that night. Almost called my mother and asked if I could come home. Almost admitted that maybe she'd been right. Maybe girls like me really don't make anything of themselves. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and started researching how to buy a hotel. 2 years later, in the spring of 2021, I purchased a 30-room property in Augusta, Georgia. It was run-down hemorrhaging money with a staff of 6 and a 1-star rating on TripAdvisor. The owner was desperate to sell. I was desperate to buy. I renamed it the Augusta House, renovated it room by room, doing half the work myself. Hired a young manager named Graham Reed, my general manager, who believed in my vision even when it felt impossible. Within 18 months, we were profitable. Within 2 years, we were thriving. By 2024, I owned 5 boutique hotels and 2 upscale restaurants across Georgia and South Carolina. Cooper Hospitality Group, my company, my name. The Magnolia Grand Hotel in Savannah was my crown jewel, 80 rooms of restored Southern elegance in the heart of the historic district. When I bought it, everyone said I was overextending, that I'd lose everything. They were wrong. Graham is the only person here tonight who knows who I really am. He's standing near the bar, nursing a bourbon and watching the crowd with the same careful attention I taught him. When our eyes meet across the ballroom, he gives me the smallest nod. We've got this. The thing about building something from nothing is this: you learn to stay quiet. You learn that people underestimate you. And sometimes that's the most powerful weapon you have. So, when the invitation arrived 6 weeks ago, cream cardstock with gold lettering inviting me to my brother's engagement party at the Magnolia Grand Hotel, I knew exactly what I had to do. Show up, observe, and wait. Judith was the one who found me first. I was standing near the bar watching Graham handle a minor crisis with the champagne service when I felt her presence behind me. That particular combination of Chanel No. 5 and disapproval, I would have recognized it anywhere. Maureen. Her voice was carefully neutral, the kind of tone you'd use with a distant acquaintance you'd rather not engage with. I didn't expect you to actually come. I turned to face my mother. She looked older than I remembered, more lines around her eyes, more silver in her hair. But her posture was the same ramrod straight shoulders, back chin, slightly raised. The posture of a woman who'd spent her whole life trying to prove she belonged in rooms she couldn't quite afford. Kenneth invited me, I said simply. That was true enough. The invitation had been addressed to Ms. Maureen Cooper, forwarded to an old email address I'd forgotten I'd given him years ago. Her gaze traveled over my dress, a simple navy sheath, elegant but understated. I'd chosen it carefully. Not too expensive, not too cheap. Nothing that would draw attention or raise questions. You came straight from work. It wasn't really a question. It was a criticism, wrapped in concern. I couldn't get away any earlier. She glanced toward the center of the room where Miranda was laughing with a group of bridesmaids. Well, try to make a good impression with the Ashfords. They're very elegant people, very sophisticated. Unlike you went unsaid, but I heard it anyway. I'll do my best, I said, keeping my voice level. Kenneth appeared then, his arm around Miranda's waist. He looked happy, genuinely happy in a way I'd never seen before. For just a moment, I felt something soften in my chest. Whatever else was happening tonight, my brother had found someone who made him smile like that. Hey, Maureen. He gave me the kind of nod you'd give a coworker you vaguely recognized. Not quite dismissive, but close. Glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it. He grinned, oblivious to the tension crackling between my mother and me. Mom gave Miranda Grandma Frances's necklace. Wasn't that generous? The world tilted. The necklace. I looked past Kenneth to Miranda's throat. There it was, a delicate gold chain with 3 small diamonds set in a simple pendant. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth. Just a quiet, elegant piece that had been in our family for 3 generations. My grandmother's necklace. My necklace. It's beautiful on her, don't you think? Judith was watching me now, her eyes sharp, looking for a reaction. I didn't give her one. It's lovely. I managed. My voice sounded far away, even to my own ears. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Grandma Frances in her hospital bed, her hand wrapped around mine. I was 16, all sharp angles and desperate hope. She'd pulled me close, her breath, wheezing, and pressed the necklace into my palm. This is for you, my dreamer, my fighter. You're going to do something extraordinary, baby girl. Don't you ever let anyone tell you different. Judith had been in the room. She'd been standing right there by the window watching. She'd heard every word. And she'd given it to Miranda anyway. The Ashfords have such refined taste, Judith was saying. Miranda mentioned she admired it, and I just thought, well, it seemed perfect for the occasion. A way to welcome her into the family properly. That was very thoughtful, I said. Each word felt like swallowing glass. Kenneth was already pulling Miranda away, eager to introduce her to someone else. Neither of them noticed when I excused myself a murmured explanation about needing air, needing the restroom, needing something other than standing there, watching my grandmother's legacy sparkle on a stranger's throat. I made it to the hallway before the first tear fell. The necklace was bad enough, the final proof that I'd never mattered, that even my grandmother's dying wish could be overwritten by Judith's need to impress the right people. But what I overheard next would change everything. Preston Ashford's voice carried down the hallway like he wanted to be overheard. I'd barely made it 20 feet from the ballroom when I heard him that smooth, cultivated southern drawl that Miranda's father wielded like a weapon at dinner parties. But there was nothing smooth about his tone now. It was sharp, urgent, stripped of its usual charm. I froze, one hand still pressed against my chest where my heart was hammering. No, we can't wait any longer. His voice echoed off the marble floors. The feds are closing in on the Phoenix case. I should have kept walking. Should have found a bathroom, fixed my face, pulled myself together. But something in his tone, the barely controlled panic, rooted me to the spot. I stepped backward into an alcove near the service entrance, pressing myself against the wall. From here, I could see Preston's shadow stretching across the hallway floor as he paced near the emergency exit door. He was 15 feet away, phone pressed to his ear, completely unaware he had an audience. Once she's his wife. Preston was saying, the $7 million policy activates. Double indemnity clause means $14 million if it's accidental. 6 weeks from now, a hiking accident in the North Georgia mountains. Tragic. Sudden. By the time anyone realizes what happened, we're on a plane to Costa Rica. My blood turned to ice. This family has money. Preston continued, his voice rising with frustration. Mortgage paid off completely. Medical bills covered in full. They're loaded and they don't even flaunt it. It's perfect. Kenneth Cooper is the ideal target. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what I was hearing. Miranda has him completely convinced, Preston said. He's so far gone, he'd walk off a cliff if she asked him to. And in 6 weeks, that's essentially what he'll do. There was a pause. Preston listened to whoever was on the other end. Helena's handling the wedding details, he said. I'm managing the insurance paperwork. The policy's already in place. We just need the marriage certificate to make it official. Then we wait for the perfect moment. Another pause. Longer this time. Yes, I'm aware of the risks. Preston's voice had gone cold. But this isn't like Phoenix. That was messy. This will be clean. An inexperienced hiker, difficult terrain, a tragic fall. By the time the autopsy comes back, if it comes back, we'll be long gone. My legs were shaking so badly I had to lock my knees to stay upright. The money trail is clean, Preston said. They'll never trace it back to us. And even if they somehow do, we've got enough hidden assets to disappear permanently. He was quiet for a moment, listening. The federal investigation is into our previous work. They don't know about Kenneth. They don't even know we're in Georgia. We've been careful. Previous work. The words echoed in my skull. This wasn't their first time. This was a pattern, a business model. 6 weeks, Preston said firmly. That's the timeline. Wedding Saturday, honeymoon in the mountains the following weekend. Accident the week after, payout within 30 days. We're out of the country within 48 hours of receiving the money. Another pause. Yes, I'm certain. Miranda's done this before. She knows how to play the grieving widow. The world tilted sideways. Done this before. All right, Preston said, his voice finally relaxing slightly. I need to get back before Helena notices I'm gone. We'll talk tomorrow about the final details. He ended the call. I heard his footsteps moving away back toward the ballroom, leaving me trembling in the shadows. I don't know how long I stood there, seconds, minutes. Time felt elastic and strange. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what I'd just heard. They were going to end Kenneth's life. They thought he was wealthy, that our family was wealthy. They'd seen the paid-off mortgage, the covered medical bills, and assumed money that didn't actually exist. Except it did exist. It just wasn't Kenneth's. It was mine. I'd been the one paying those bills for the past 3 years, anonymously through a web of LLCs and foundations and consulting agreements designed to make it look like Kenneth was some kind of business genius. I'd done it to help my family without their pride getting in the way, without them rejecting me outright. And now that generosity was going to get my brother killed, because the Ashfords had mistaken my success for his. Had seen the comfortable lifestyle I'd quietly provided and assumed Kenneth was their perfect mark, a wealthy, small-town guy with no street smarts, ripe for exploitation. They were planning to marry him, insure him, and stage an accident in the North Georgia mountains 6 weeks from now. And they'd done it before. Preston had said so himself. Miranda knew how to play the grieving widow. How many men had there been? How many tragic accidents? How many families had been left grieving while the Ashfords disappeared to Costa Rica or wherever they ran to? My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my thighs, trying to steady myself. The necklace didn't matter anymore. My mother's favoritism, Kenneth's dismissiveness, all of it felt suddenly small and petty compared to this. My brother had 6 weeks to live, unless I stopped it. But first, I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. I had exactly one person in this building I could trust. I found Graham near the service entrance clipboard and hand-checking inventory with one of the catering staff. When he saw my face, he immediately excused himself and followed me down the corridor toward the management office. "What happened?" he asked quietly. We'd worked together long enough that he could read my moods like weather patterns. "I need you to run a background check," I said, pulling out my phone. "The Ashfords. All of them. Preston, Helena, and especially Miranda." Graham's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't question it. That was one of the things I valued most about him. He trusted my instincts even when I couldn't explain them yet. "How deep are we going?" "Criminal level deep." I met his eyes. "I need to know everything. Previous addresses, employment history, legal records, financial trails, everything you can find." He nodded slowly. "This is about Kenneth." It wasn't a question. Graham had been with me long enough to know about my family, the complicated history, the distance, the silent support I'd provided from the shadows. "It's about keeping him alive," I said simply. Something flickered in Graham's expression, concern maybe, or recognition of how serious this was. "I'll start now. Give me an hour." "Thank you." He headed toward the back office where we kept the administrative computers. I watched him go, grateful beyond words for his loyalty. In a building full of people who were supposed to be my family, Graham was the only one who actually knew me. I couldn't go back to the ballroom. Not yet. Not with Preston and Miranda in there, pretending to be legitimate people while plotting to end my brother's life. I headed out to the parking lot instead. I needed air, space, privacy to think. My car was parked in the far corner, away from the guest spaces, a silver Tesla that I'd carefully avoided mentioning to anyone in my family. They didn't need to know what I drove. They didn't need to know anything about the life I'd built. I slid into the driver's seat and sat there in the darkness, hands gripping the steering wheel. For 3 years, I'd been living a double life. Every month, I'd drive to Hartwell. Not to my parents' house, I'd never actually gone inside, not since the day I left, but to the diner across the street. I'd sit in the corner booth with a cup of coffee and a newspaper watching their house through the window. I'd see my mother in the garden, my father on the porch, Kenneth coming and going in his truck. I'd watch them live their lives completely unaware that I was there, that I'd ever been there, that I'd paid off their mortgage, covered my father's surgery, funneled money into Kenneth's account so he'd look successful. The system I'd built was elegant in its simplicity. Cooper Properties LLC had purchased the mortgage from the bank in 2021. As far as my parents knew, they'd been approved for some kind of modification program. They had no idea the LLC was mine, that I owned the paper on their house. The Cooper Family Foundation, named vaguely enough to sound official, had covered Gerald's knee surgery in 2022, $67,000 paid in full. The hospital told them it was a charitable medical grant. They never questioned it. And CH Consulting Group, the name deliberately bland and corporate, had been paying Kenneth quarterly consulting fees of $3,200 since 2021. $12,800 a year, carefully structured to look like legitimate contract work. Judith had bragged to her church friends that Kenneth was doing business consulting on the side. It was all me. Every dollar, every payment, every carefully constructed fiction that made them feel secure and successful. And that's exactly what had made Kenneth a target. The Ashfords had seen the paid-off mortgage, the covered medical bills, the mysterious consulting income. They'd done their research, though apparently not deep enough, and concluded that the Cooper family had money. They weren't wrong. Someone in the Cooper family did have money. They'd just targeted the wrong Cooper. The irony was devastating. My generosity, my desperate need to help the family that had rejected me, had painted a target on Kenneth's back. The Ashfords had seen the comfortable lifestyle I'd quietly provided and mistaken it for Kenneth's success. And even when they discovered the truth, if they discovered the truth, it wouldn't save him. They'd already committed to the plan. The wedding was scheduled. The insurance was in place. They'd follow through regardless, because walking away would mean admitting defeat. People like the Ashfords didn't walk away. My phone buzzed. A text from Graham found something. Coming to your car now. I looked up and saw him crossing the parking lot, his face illuminated by his phone screen. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders. He opened my passenger door and slid in, bringing cold air and the smell of kitchen garlic with him. "Ms. Cooper," he said quietly. His voice had that careful quality it got when he was about to deliver bad news. "You need to see this." He handed me his phone. On the screen was a news article from Phoenix, Arizona, dated 3 years ago. The headline read, "Wealthy businessman dies in hiking accident. Wife inherits $2.3 million. There was a photo. A man in his 30s smiling at the camera. Next to him, a woman with dark hair and a familiar smile. Miranda Ashford. Except the caption called her something else. Tracy Dunlap, widow of deceased Brandon Muller. "There are 4 more, Graham said. Same pattern. Different cities. Different names. Different men. All of them ended up gone. All of them had life insurance policies, and all of them were with women who look exactly like Miranda." He scrolled through more articles. Christopher Daniels in Seattle, Anthony Russell in Portland, Stephen Walsh in Denver, Matthew Hendricks in Sacramento. A trail of men who'd ended up gone and grieving widows who disappeared after collecting insurance payouts. "Ms. Cooper," Graham said softly, "they're not just con artists, they're dangerous criminals." Graham handed me a dossier that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I opened it under the harsh LED light of my car's interior, the manila folder thick with printed articles, police reports, and photographs. My hands were already shaking before I read the first page. Document 1 Seattle, Washington, August 2016. The headline read, "Local man perishes in tragic hiking accident. Brandon Muller, 32 years old, married 2 months. He'd been hiking near Mount Rainier when he'd fallen from a cliff face. His body had been recovered 3 days later. The autopsy showed blunt force trauma consistent with a fall. His wife Sandra Mitchell had been with him on the hike. She'd called for help immediately, hysterical, devastated. She told investigators that Brandon had been trying to get a better view for a photo when he'd slipped. The insurance payout $1.8 million. Ruled an accident, case closed. Sandra Mitchell had collected the money and disappeared within 6 weeks. Document 2, Portland, Oregon, March 2018. Man passes away in carbon monoxide incident at home. Christopher Daniels, 34 years old, married 4 months. He'd been found in his garage, his car still running carbon monoxide levels in his blood fatally high. His wife Miranda Chen had discovered him when she'd returned from a grocery run. She'd called 911, performed CPR, done everything right. The first responders had praised her quick thinking, though it hadn't been enough to save him. The investigation concluded it was a tragic accident. Christopher had been working on his car, had left it running for warmth on a cold March day, had gotten drowsy and passed out. The insurance payout $2.2 million. Ruled an accident, case closed. Miranda Hayes had collected the money and moved to Arizona within 2 months. Document 3, Phoenix, Arizona, June 2020. Businessman lost his life in apparent medication overdose. Anthony Russell, 36 years old, married 3 months. He'd been found unresponsive in bed, empty pill bottles on the nightstand. The medical examiner determined he'd taken a fatal combination of prescription painkillers and sleep medication. His wife, Tracy Peterson, had been out of town visiting family when it happened. She'd returned to find him gone. The investigation noted she'd been devastated, had required sedation at the hospital. Anthony had recently undergone back surgery. He'd been prescribed multiple medications. The theory was that he'd accidentally mixed them, not understanding the danger. The insurance payout $3.5 million. The family had contested the ruling, hired their own investigator, but ultimately the case was closed as an accidental overdose. Tracy Peterson had collected the money and vanished. The family's private investigator had tried to track her, but the trail went cold in Nevada. Document 4. Denver, Colorado, November 2022. Local man drowns during lake outing. Stephen Walsh, 38 years old, married 5 months. He'd been paddleboarding on Cherry Creek Reservoir when he'd gone under. His body had been recovered 4 hours later. His wife, Celeste Williams, had been on the shore when it happened. She'd reported seeing him struggle, had called for help, immediately had tried to swim out to him herself, but hadn't been a strong enough swimmer. The autopsy showed water in his lungs, no signs of foul play. Stephen had been a decent swimmer, but not experienced with paddleboarding. The lake had been choppy that day. The insurance payout $1.9 million. Ruled an accident, case closed. Celeste Williams had collected the money and left Colorado within weeks. Document 5, Austin, Texas, February 2023. Man doesn't survive car accident on rural highway. Matthew Hendricks, 40 years old, married 2 months. He'd been driving home from work when his car had gone off the road, crashed into a tree, and caught fire. The crash reconstruction suggested brake failure. His wife, Adriana Foster, had been at home when the police arrived. She'd collapsed when they'd told her. Friends and neighbors described her as inconsolable at the funeral. The vehicle inspection confirmed brake line failure, though. Whether it was due to poor maintenance or defect was unclear. Matthew had been driving an older model truck. The insurance payout $2 million. Ruled an accident, case closed. Adriana Foster had collected the money and disappeared. I looked up from the documents, my vision blurring. Graham was watching me with grim sympathy. "Do you see the pattern?" he asked quietly. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. All of them had married quickly within weeks or months of meeting their future wives. All of them had ended up gone within 2 to 5 months of the wedding. All of them had substantial life insurance policies. All of them had been ruled accidents, and all of the wives had disappeared after collecting the payouts. Graham pulled out a series of photographs, spread them across my dashboard. These are photos from the social media accounts' wedding announcements and news coverage of each case. I looked at them under the car light. 5 different women, 5 different styles. Blonde Sandra in Seattle, with casual Pacific Northwest vibes, dark-haired Miranda in Portland, with an artistic edge, sophisticated Tracy in Phoenix, athletic Celeste in Denver, glamorous Adriana in Austin. But the bone structure was the same, the eyes were the same, the smile was the same. It was the same woman. 5 times, 5 different identities, 5 different performances, 5 men who'd lost their lives. The last document, Graham said, pulling out a stapled report. This is from a private investigator in Arizona hired by Anthony Russell's family. He's the one who connected all 5 cases. He identified the woman as possibly being Tracy Dunlap, though he believes that might not even be her real name. She's wanted for questioning in multiple jurisdictions, but she's careful. She never stays in one place long enough to be tracked down. He paused, his jaw tight. 5 men over 8 years, $11.4 million, and she's never been caught. I stared at the photographs, at Tracy Dunlap, or whatever her real name was, smiling in 5 different cities with 5 different men who'd thought they'd found love. Kenneth is number 6, Graham said softly. I looked up at him, my hands trembling. How much time do we have? He checked his phone. The wedding is Sunday afternoon, 46 hours. I called my lawyer at 10 o'clock on Friday night. Monica Stafford answered on the second ring. Maureen. Her voice was alert, professional. Monica didn't do small talk, especially not at this hour. What's wrong? I need you to look at something. I was already pulling the dossier back out, hands still shaking. Can you get to the Magnolia Grand now? I'm 20 minutes away. What am I looking at? A pattern, I said. 5 cases across 8 years, insurance fraud, possibly more. There was a pause. I heard the sound of keys jingling, a door closing. Monica was already moving. Send me what you have, I'm on my way. I forwarded Graham's documents while he drove us back toward the hotel's administrative wing. We needed privacy space to work and access to resources. The office suite on the 3rd floor would be empty at this hour. Monica arrived 18 minutes later, heels clicking purposefully down the marble corridor. She was in her 40s, silver-streaked dark hair, pulled back, wearing jeans, and a Georgetown law sweatshirt, her off-duty uniform. But her eyes were sharp as she scanned the documents I'd spread across the conference table. I know this case, she said, immediately tapping the Phoenix file. Anthony Russell. The family hired a private investigator. I consulted on the legal side. She looked up at me. They never got closure. The woman disappeared. She's here, I said, in my hotel, about to marry my brother. Monica's expression hardened. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling that investigator, and I'm bringing in Catherine Wells. She's the best forensic accountant I know. If there's a money trail, she'll find it. Within 15 minutes, we had Catherine on a video call, her sharp eyes scanning through financial documents Graham had pulled from public records. She was younger than Monica, barely 30, but she had a reputation for unraveling complex fraud cases. Give me 30 minutes, Catherine said, fingers already flying across her keyboard. I'll have their complete financial profile. While we waited, Graham mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Kenneth looked really unwell earlier, he said. At the rehearsal dinner last night. I noticed because he kept having to sit down. He looked pale, shaky. Miranda said he had the flu. I remembered seeing Kenneth at the party. He had looked pale, almost gray, and he'd been holding onto furniture when he walked like he needed the support. Flu-like symptoms, I murmured, pulling up my phone. My fingers were clumsy as I typed symptoms of slow poisoning. The results made my stomach drop. Arsenic poisoning. Chronic exposure to small doses over time. Symptoms included fatigue, confusion, nausea, muscle weakness, stomach problems. Victims often thought they had the flu or food poisoning. The poison accumulated in the body, causing organ damage that made someone more vulnerable to accidents, falls, drowning, car crashes. It matched perfectly. They're already harming him, I whispered. They're not waiting for after the wedding. They're doing it now. Monica looked up sharply. What? I showed her the research, watched her face go pale as she read. The timeline, she said slowly. If they've been doing this for weeks, his body is already compromised. Any accident would be more likely to be fatal because he's already weakened. My phone rang. Monica's number, but it was a different voicemail, gravelly with a Southwest accent. Ms. Cooper. This is Detective Ray Brennan, the investigator on the Russell case. Monica asked me to call. I need to tell you something about Tracy Dunlap. I'm listening. She used arsenic on victim number 3. Anthony Russell. We didn't catch it at first. The autopsy was cursory and they ruled it an overdose. But the family pushed for a second opinion. The toxicology came back with elevated arsenic levels, not enough to cause immediate harm on its own, but enough to weaken him significantly. Made the accidental overdose a lot more certain. I closed my eyes. They're doing it to my brother. Then you need to act fast. Once arsenic gets to a certain level, even if you stop the exposure, the damage is done. How long has he been with her? 3 months. That's her timeline. She usually works fast 2 to 5 months from meeting to the incident. If he's showing symptoms now, he's probably been ingesting it for at least 6 to 8 weeks. Catherine's face appeared on the laptop screen. I've got their financials. Maureen, they're desperate. Preston and Helena Ashford have $347 in their checking account, $12,000 in credit card debt. 2 of their cards are maxed out. They've been living on borrowed money for months. Monica was already dialing another number. I'm calling the FBI. Agent Janet Pierce has been tracking these cases. She'll want to know Tracy Dunlap is in Savannah. She stepped away, phone to her ear, voice low and urgent. Graham sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs, running his hands through his hair. This is really happening, he said quietly. Yes. I looked at the evidence spread across the table. 5 files. 5 men who'd lost their lives. And now Kenneth, already being slowly harmed, already weakened for whatever accident they had planned. Monica came back, her expression grim. Agent Pierce is on her way. She'll be here by morning. But Maureen, you need to understand something. She sat down across from me, her lawyer's mask firmly in place. Even with all this evidence, if we can't stop that wedding, if Tracy becomes Kenneth's legal wife, she'll have rights. Hospital visitation rights, medical decision-making rights. The right to finish what she started. She leaned forward. We have 45 hours to build a case strong enough to arrest her before she says I do. But first I had to get back into that ballroom without drawing attention. I'd been gone for over an hour. Monica and Catherine were still working in the office upstairs, building the case we'd need to present to Agent Pierce in the morning. Graham had gone to pull security footage from the hotel cameras. We needed documentation of everything. I smoothed down my dress, checked my face in my phone camera to make sure I didn't look as rattled as I felt, and walked back into the party like I'd just stepped out to take a call. The event was winding down. It was past 11 and half. The guests had already left. The remaining ones clustered in small groups, nursing final glasses of champagne, picking at the dessert table. The energy had shifted from celebration to that tired, slightly drunk mellowness that comes at the end of long parties. I spotted Kenneth immediately. He was standing near the bar, one hand braced against the counter like he needed it for support. Even from across the room, I could see he was pale. That grayish tinge I'd noticed earlier was worse now. His other hand trembled slightly as he lifted a glass of water to his lips. My stomach clenched. The arsenic was already working on him, weakening him, making him vulnerable for whatever accident they had planned after the wedding. I had to get closer, had to see how bad it really was. I wove through the remaining guests, careful to stay out of Miranda's sightline. But as I approached Kenneth, I could see the symptoms more clearly. The slight sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning, the way he kept blinking like he was having trouble focusing, the unsteadiness in his posture. Kenneth, I said, quietly stepping beside him, are you feeling okay? He turned to me, and for a moment I saw confusion in his eyes, like he wasn't quite sure who I was or why I was talking to him. Then recognition clicked, followed immediately by defensiveness. I'm fine. His voice was slightly slurred. Just tired. Long week with the wedding prep and everything. You look like you should sit down. Maureen. He straightened up, swaying slightly. Why are you even here? Mom said you never come to family stuff. Said you didn't care about us. The words stung, but I pushed past them. That's not Kenneth. I think you should see a doctor. You don't look well. I said I'm fine. He was getting agitated now, his voice rising slightly. Jesus, I can't believe you show up after all these years just to... Kenneth, sweetheart, is she bothering you? Miranda appeared between us like a shadow materializing. She slipped her arm through Kenneth, steadying him with practiced ease, while her eyes locked onto mine with unmistakable hostility. Up close, she was even more striking than in the photos. Dark hair swept up in an elegant twist, classic features that smile that managed to be both warm and cold at the same time. The smile of someone who knew exactly how to perform. "I was just checking on him," I said evenly. "He doesn't look well." "He's just tired." "Aren't you, baby?" She stroked his arm. "It's been such a busy week. Why don't you sit down? I'll get you some water." "I'm drinking water," Kenneth mumbled, gesturing vaguely with his glass. "More water, then." Miranda's smile didn't waver, but her eyes stayed fixed on me, cold, calculating. "You're Maureen, right? Kenneth's sister. How nice that you could make it." The pause before sister was deliberate, a subtle reminder that I was barely family, barely worth acknowledging. "I wouldn't miss it," I said. "How sweet." Miranda reached for a glass of red wine from a passing server's tray. "You know, I've heard so much about you from Judith. She's mentioned how you owe—" It happened so fast. Miranda's foot seemed to catch on nothing, her body lurching forward, the wine glass flying from her hand in a perfect arc. Merlot splashed across my face, my hair the front of my dress. Cold liquid dripped down my neck, soaked into the fabric. The smell of it, dark tannic, overwhelming, filled my nose. "Oh my God, I am so sorry." Miranda's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with manufactured horror. "I'm so clumsy, I can't believe I just did that." The bridesmaids materialized around us, their faces masks of concern that dissolved into barely suppressed giggles the moment they thought I wasn't looking. "Are you okay?" One of them asked, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "That's going to stain," another murmured. I stood there, wine dripping off my chin, my dress ruined, acutely aware of every eye in the room turning toward us. The remaining guests watching, whispering. "You really should go clean up," Miranda said, her voice all sweetness and concern. "There's a bathroom for staff down that hallway. I'm sure Graham can show you where the cleaning supplies are." Staff. The word landed like a slap. Maureen. My mother's voice cut through the murmurs. She rushed over her face, a mixture of horror and anger, but not directed at Miranda. "Look what you've done." Standing right in the middle of everything, blocking people. "Las indicts." "Mom, it's fine." "It's not fine. You're making a scene at your brother's engagement party." Judith grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. "Go get cleaned up, please." I looked at Kenneth. He was staring at me with confusion and what might have been pity, but he didn't say anything, didn't defend me. Just stood there leaning on Miranda for support, too sick and too indoctrinated to see what was happening. "I'll go change," I said quietly. As I turned to leave, I caught Miranda's eye one last time. The concern had vanished. What I saw instead was cold calculation, a predator recognizing a threat. She knew. She knew I was watching her. She knew I saw through the performance. And this had been a warning. I made it to the bathroom before my hands started shaking. Not from embarrassment, from rage, and from a realization that made my blood run cold. Miranda knew I'd seen through her, which meant she'd be watching me now, which meant she might accelerate her timeline, which meant Kenneth had even less time than I'd thought. I'd cleaned up as best I could, washed the wine off my face and out of my hair in the staff bathroom she'd so helpfully directed me to change into the spare dress I kept in my office. The navy sheath was ruined, probably beyond saving. I'd deal with it later. I was walking past the bridal suite on my way back to find Graham when I saw the door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see Miranda sitting at the vanity, her back to the door, counting a stack of bills. Cash. Hundreds from the look of it. Her phone was on the table beside her, and I could hear her mother Helena's voice through the speaker. "Just need to get through Sunday. After that, we're clear." "I know, Mom." Miranda's voice was different now, harder. No trace of the sweet Southern bells she'd been playing all evening. "But we need more cash now. The hotel wants final payment for the reception, and Preston already maxed out the cards." I pushed the door open. "We need to talk." Miranda's head whipped around her hands, moving to cover the cash. For a split second, I saw real panic in her eyes. Then the mask slammed back into place. "You're not allowed in here." Her voice was ice. I know who you are, I said, closing the door behind me. My heart was hammering, but my voice stayed steady. You don't know anything about me. Anthony Russell, Stephen Walsh, Brandon Muller. I took a step closer. Should I keep going? Something flickered in her expression, recognition calculation before her face went perfectly blank. Those names don't mean anything to me. Phoenix, 2020. There's a private investigator who's still looking for you. His client's family never stopped searching for answers. The mask cracked. Just slightly. Miranda stood up, and when she turned to face me fully, the sweet fiancé was gone. What was left was cold and sharp and dangerous. You're making a very big mistake. Am I? Whatever you think you know, you don't have proof. She stepped toward me, her voice dropping. And even if you did, Kenneth would never believe you over me. You abandoned this family. You're the crazy sister who shows up after 10 years trying to sabotage her brother's wedding because she can't stand to see him happy. The words hit harder than I expected because they were exactly what Kenneth already believed. He's sick, I said. You're poisoning him. Miranda smiled. Actually smiled. It was the most chilling thing I'd seen all night. Prove it. Before I could respond, the door opened behind me. Miranda, what's going on? Kenneth. Of course, the absolute worst timing possible. I watched Miranda's entire demeanor transform in the space of a heartbeat. The cold predator vanished, replaced by a trembling, tearful victim. Her eyes welled up. Her hands shook, and when she spoke, her voice broke with perfect practiced devastation. Kenneth, thank God. She rushed past me to him, her whole body sagging with relief. Your sister she just accused me of the most horrible things. What? Kenneth's arm came around her automatically, his eyes going hard as they landed on me. She said I'm trying to harm you. Miranda's voice hitched tears spilling down her cheeks. That I'm some kind of criminal. That I don't even know what she's talking about. Maureen, what the hell is wrong with you? Kenneth's voice was low and furious. Kenneth, listen to me. I tried to keep my voice calm, reasonable. She's not who she says she is. Her real name is Tracy Dunlap. She's wanted for questioning in multiple Stop. Kenneth held up a hand. Just stop. I don't know what your problem is, but you need to leave. Now. Please. Miranda sobbed against his chest. I tried to be nice to her. I tried to welcome her to the family. But she keeps... You don't have to explain anything, baby. Kenneth's jaw was tight. Maureen was just leaving. Kenneth, she's poisoning you. The words burst out of me desperate. The symptoms you've been having, the weakness, the confusion, the nausea, it's arsenic. She's been giving you arsenic to weaken you before the... That's enough. Kenneth's voice rose, his face flushed. You need professional help, Maureen, seriously. This is insane. The door opened again. Helena Ashford stepped in, her expression carefully neutral. Is there a problem? No, Kenneth said firmly. No problem. Maureen was just leaving. Miranda turned her face toward Helena, her cheeks wet with tears, the picture of a traumatized bride. Helena's eyes found mine, and I saw something there, not concern, not confusion, satisfaction. They'd planned this. If I confronted them, they'd make me look crazy, unstable, the jealous sister trying to ruin her brother's happiness. And it was working. I'll see myself out, I said quietly. I walked out of that room with Kenneth's disgusted stare burning into my back. I'd shown my hand too early. Miranda knew I was targeting her now. Kenneth thought I was delusional, and I just lost the element of surprise that might have been my only advantage. Graham was waiting in the hallway, his face grim. Agent Pierce can't get here until morning, he said. Flight delays, and Monica just called. He paused. They found something else. But it started 45 minutes earlier with Graham's pale face and the words I'd been dreading. Bad news, he said. We were still in the hallway outside the bridal suite, my confrontation with Miranda and Kenneth barely 5 minutes behind us. Someone reported jewelry stolen from the Ashford's room. My stomach dropped. When, just now, Preston called down to security. Graham's jaw was tight. They're asking for you. I knew what this was before we even got to the security office. Another attack, another trap. But I had to play along because refusing would look even worse. Carl, the night security manager, met us outside the office. He was professional, careful, someone I'd hired myself 2 years ago because he was thorough and fair. "Ms. Cooper," he said quietly, "I need you to come with me." Inside the security office, Preston and Helena Ashford were already there. Preston was pacing, his face flushed with what looked like genuine distress. Helena sat in one of the chairs, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Performance, all of it. "Thank God," Preston said when I entered. "Maybe you can help us sort this out. We've had a theft. My wife's necklace worth $15,000 and a pair of diamond earrings $8,000. They were in our room safe this afternoon. Now they're gone." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure how I can help." "Well," Carl pulled up the security footage on his computer. "We were reviewing the hallway cameras. The only person who was near the Ashfords' room tonight who isn't staff or family was—" He paused, uncomfortable. "Was you Miss Cooper?" I stepped closer to look at the screen. The timestamp showed 10:47 p.m. right after my meeting with Monica and before I'd returned to the party. The footage showed me walking down that hallway, the hallway that, yes, connected to the administrative wing where the bridal suite was located. "I was heading to my office," I said. "That hallway connects to the back stairs. I use it all the time." "Of course," Carl nodded, "but given the timing and the report, you think I stole their jewelry?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended. "We're not accusing anyone," Carl said quickly. "We're just trying to establish a timeline. I absolutely am accusing someone." Preston stepped forward. "My wife's jewelry is missing. This woman was near our room. And honestly, from what I understand, she hasn't exactly been welcome at this event. Maybe she was looking for some kind of payback." The trap was closing. I could feel it. "I was never near your room," I said firmly. "I walked down a public hallway. That's not the same thing." "Then you won't mind if we verify that—" Preston's voice was smooth. Too smooth. "Carl, surely there's a protocol for this. A search maybe—" Carl looked deeply uncomfortable. "Mr. Ashford, I don't think—" "I insist. If she's innocent, she has nothing to hide. And if she's not—" Preston let the implication hang. That's when I understood. They'd planted something. This whole scene, the distress, the security footage, the reasonable request for a search, it was all theater. And the finale would be finding their jewelry in my possession. Two choices: refuse the search and look guilty, or agree and get caught with planted evidence. Either way, they won. "Fine," I heard myself say. "Search my office." We moved as a group down the hall, me, Carl, Graham, Preston, and Helena trailing behind like vultures. My office was on the 3rd floor, a corner suite with windows overlooking the historic district. I decorated it carefully, family photos. I'd never shown my family diplomas from the business courses I'd taken at night. The deed to my first hotel framed on the wall. Carl was methodical. He checked my desk drawers. First files, office supplies, nothing unusual. Then the credenza, the bookshelf, the small safe where I kept petty cash and important documents. And then the bottom drawer of my desk. His face changed when he opened it. For a moment, he just stared, then carefully reached in and pulled out a small velvet pouch. No. He opened the pouch. A gold necklace spilled out, glittering under the office lights, and a pair of diamond earrings. "Oh my God," Helena gasped. "That's them. That's my jewelry. Thief." Preston's voice was triumphant. "Call the police, Carl. I want her arrested for theft." The room spun. This was it. If I got arrested now, if I lost the next 48 hours dealing with police and lawyers and bail hearings, Kenneth would be dead by Sunday afternoon. "Ms. Cooper," Carl said quietly. He looked genuinely sorry. "I'm going to have to call this in. She's family," Helena was saying. "Kenneth's sister. How could she do this to us on our daughter's wedding weekend?" Someone must have called Judith and Kenneth because suddenly they were in the doorway. My mother's face was a mask of horror and disappointment. Kenneth just looked tired and sad. "Maureen," Judith whispered, "how could you—" "I know you've been struggling," Kenneth said. He was swaying slightly on his feet, that grayish tinge back in his face. But stealing from our guests? I didn't. My voice broke. This is a setup. They planted... Of course you'd say that. Preston interrupted. Carl, are you calling the police or not? Two paths, both ending in disaster. Or, I looked at Graham. He was standing near the door, his face agonized. We'd worked together for 6 years. He knew every sacrifice I'd made to build this company. Every night I'd stayed late. Every weekend I'd given up. Every relationship I'd let slip away because the hotels came first. He knew what revealing the truth would cost me. And he did it anyway. There's something everyone should know, Graham said. His voice was steady, clear. He stepped forward, positioning himself beside me. This isn't a guest. This is Maureen Cooper. She doesn't work here. She owns this hotel. Silence. Absolute shocked silence. What? Judith's voice was barely a whisper. I looked at Carl. Pull up the ownership documents. Property records, business registration. It took him 30 seconds. The documents filled his screen. Cooper Hospitality Group CEO Maureen Cooper. Properties: the Magnolia Grand Hotel, Savannah Flagship, the Augusta House, Charleston Harbor Hotel, Coastal Breeze Resort, the Peachtree Inn. Preston's face went white, then red. He just accused the owner of the hotel, his daughter's wedding venue, of stealing from him. So, I said quietly, you're suggesting I broke into a guest room in my own hotel, stole jewelry, and planted it in my own office? I turned to Carl. Does that make sense to you? No, ma'am, Carl said immediately. It absolutely does not. I looked at Preston and Helena. Get out. Now. Before I have you arrested for filing a false report, defamation, and trespassing. You have 5 minutes to collect your things and leave my property. Preston opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Helena. They turned and walked out without another word, moving fast like criminals fleeing a crime scene, which I suppose they were. I turned to Judith and Kenneth. My mother was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Kenneth looked like he might fall over. You own this? Judith's voice shook. We'll talk later, I said. There are more important things to deal with right now. I walked past them, leaving them standing in my office, surrounded by evidence of the life I'd built that they'd never known existed. I'd revealed myself to save myself, but I'd also just shown the Ashfords that I was a real threat, someone with resources, money, power. Someone who could actually stop them, which meant they'd have to stop me first. My phone rang. Graham's voice was tight with panic. Get to the hospital now. Kenneth just collapsed. Kenneth was in critical condition when I arrived at Savannah Memorial. The emergency room was too bright, too loud machines, beeping phones, ringing the metallic smell of disinfectant, mixing with fear. Graham had driven me breaking every speed limit between the Magnolia Grand and the hospital. I'd made calls during the ride, Monica first, then Catherine, mobilizing everyone. Judith and Gerald were in the waiting room. My father sat slumped in a plastic chair, his face gray. My mother stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. When she saw me, something hardened in her expression. What are you doing here? He's my brother, I said quietly. Now you care. Her voice was sharp-cutting. Now that you own hotels and have money to throw around, now you suddenly remember you have a family. Mom, you have no rights here, Maureen. You're not on any of his paperwork. You're not his emergency contact. You're nobody to him. The words landed like physical blows, but I didn't have time to process them because a doctor emerged from the treatment area pulling off latex gloves. Cooper family. Gerald stood up. That's us. I'm Dr. Sarah Martinez. Your son is stable now, but we need to run some additional tests. She glanced at her tablet. His symptoms are concerning. The collapse, the weakness, the neurological presentation, we need to do a full toxicology screen. Toxicology. Judith's voice rose. You think he took something? I think something was given to him, Dr. Martinez said carefully. His symptoms suggest poisoning of some kind. Test for arsenic, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. Dr. Martinez's eyebrows rose. Why would you specifically? Please. I stepped forward. Trust me, test for arsenic. Something in my voice must have convinced her because she nodded. I'll add it to the panel. She disappeared back through the double doors. Judith rounded on me. What do you know about this? Before I could answer, the waiting room doors burst open. Miranda rushed in her face a perfect mask of devastation. Her makeup was smudged carefully, artfully smudged, and tears streaked down her cheeks. Oh my God, what happened to Kenneth? She looked around wildly. Is he okay? Please tell me he's okay. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't known what she really was, I might have believed it myself. He's stable, Gerald said. They're running tests. Miranda pressed a hand to her chest, breathing hard like she might hyperventilate. I need to see him. Where is he? They're not allowing visitors yet, Judith said. But I'm his fiancé. Miranda looked at Dr. Martinez, who'd returned with a clipboard. I have the right to see him, don't I? Currently, only immediate family is permitted, Dr. Martinez said professionally. I am family, Miranda's voice cracked. We're getting married tomorrow. The ceremony is at 2:00. I have every right. The wedding will be postponed, I said. Obviously. Miranda's head snapped toward me. For just a second less than a second, the mask slipped. I saw pure cold fury flash across her face before the worried fiancé slid back into place. Of course, she said, her voice trembling. Kenneth's health is all that matters. I want to be there for him. My phone buzzed. Monica. I stepped away to take the call. Tell me you have good news. Temporary protective order granted, Monica said. Judge Turner signed it 20 minutes ago. The hospital has been notified the Ashfords are banned from Kenneth's room for the next 24 hours. 24 hours, that's all. It's all I could get on emergency filing without a full hearing. The order expires tomorrow at 2 a.m. She paused. Maureen, if we can't build a case before then, I know. If the order expired and Kenneth was still hospitalized, Miranda would have legal access as his fiancé. She could finish what she'd started, and no one would be able to stop her. 90 minutes later, Dr. Martinez found us again. Her face was grim. The toxicology results are back. Arsenic. Significant levels in his bloodstream. She looked at each of us in turn. He's been ingesting it for weeks, possibly months. His liver and kidneys are showing early signs of damage. Judith made a sound like something breaking. If this had continued another week, Dr. Martinez continued, the organ failure would have been irreversible. He might not have survived. Who would do this? Judith's voice was barely a whisper. Who would poison my son? I looked across the waiting room. Miranda stood by the vending machines, her phone pressed to her ear. When she sensed my gaze, she looked up. Our eyes met. Cold, calculating. Not a trace of the worried fiancé remained. Gerald, who'd been silent through all of this, finally spoke. His voice was rough, broken. Someone tried to end my son's life. The words hung in the air. Dr. Martinez glanced at the protective order paperwork she'd received. The Ashford family has been restricted from this floor, she said carefully. Is there something I should know? Yes, I said. There's a lot you should know. My phone buzzed again. A text from Monica, time-stamped 4:17 a.m. Agent Pierce is here. She wants to meet. But she says without concrete evidence of Miranda acting not just the arsenic results, but proof of her administering it, she can't make an arrest. We need Miranda to try again, and we need to catch her in the act. The wedding was supposed to happen in 14 hours. The protective order would expire in 24 hours. We had a narrow window to catch a woman who'd successfully gotten away with this 5 times before. And Kenneth's life depended on us not missing it. We met in a hospital conference room that smelled like stale coffee and antiseptic. It was just past 5 in the morning, and I'd been awake for over 24 hours. My hands shook as I poured myself another cup of terrible vending machine coffee. Agent Janet Pierce was in her mid-40s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, and eyes that had seen too much. She sat across from me with the confident stillness of someone who'd spent decades catching criminals. I've been tracking Tracy Dunlap for 18 months, she said without preamble. 5 men lost their lives, $11 million stolen, and she's always been one step ahead. Monica sat beside me, her laptop open, legal pads covered in notes. Graham stood by the door, arms crossed. On the screen, Catherine Wells joined us via video conference, dark circles under her eyes. Walk me through what we have, Pierce said. Catherine pulled up financial documents. The Ashfords are broke. $347 in checking $12,000 in credit card debt. They're desperate. The money trail shows a pattern. They move to a new city, identify a target, and set up the scam. Phoenix, Denver, Seattle, Portland, Austin. Same pattern every time. Prior cases, Pierce asked. Circumstantial, Monica said. We have news articles, insurance payouts, wives who disappeared, but no physical evidence connecting Tracy to any of the incidents. Each one was ruled an accident. And Kenneth? Arsenic confirmed, I said. My voice sounded hollow. Significant levels, weeks or months of exposure. But, Pierce said, her tone pointed, we can't prove Miranda administered it. The words hung in the air. Kenneth lives alone when he's not with her, Monica said quietly. A defense attorney would argue contamination from his work environment, his home, his car. We can prove he was poisoned. We cannot prove who poisoned him. Which means, Pierce continued, even with everything we know, we can't make an arrest that will stick. Not yet. So what do we do? My voice cracked on the last word. Pierce leaned forward. We give her the opportunity to act again, under controlled circumstances. The room went very quiet. The protective order, Pierce said. We lift it, temporarily. We let Miranda know she can visit Kenneth. No. The word was out before I could think. Absolutely not. His room will be under complete surveillance. Hidden cameras, audio recording the works. We'll have a team monitoring from the adjacent room. Medical staff will be on standby. Pierce's voice was steady, reasonable. If she attempts to inject him with anything, administer any harmful substance, we'll have it on video. Concrete, undeniable evidence. You want to use my brother as bait? I stood up my chair, scraping loudly. What if something goes wrong? Ms. Cooper, Pierce said, and her voice gentled slightly. He's already being harmed. He's been ingesting poison for months. This is the only way to save him and ensure Tracy Dunlap never does this to anyone else. I turned to Monica. Tell me there's another way. She looked at me with something like pity. If we don't catch her in the act, she walks. Even if we arrest her now, any halfway decent lawyer gets the charges dropped. She'll disappear again. Find another victim, another Kenneth. And your brother, Pierce added, will spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering if she'll come back to finish what she started. The choice crystallized in front of me, sharp and terrible. Play it safe. Keep the protective order in place. Let Miranda walk away. Kenneth stays in danger forever, always wondering. Tracy finds victim number 7. Or risk everything. Use Kenneth unconscious, vulnerable, unable to consent to catch her. One chance. High stakes. Potentially save hundreds of future victims. Maureen, Monica said softly, it's your decision. But we have 19 hours until the protective order expires anyway. After that, Miranda can visit as his fiancée and will have no control over the situation. A memory hit me unbidden. Kenneth teaching me to ride a bike when I was 7. He'd been 12 already, the golden child, but for one afternoon he'd been patient with me, had run alongside me holding the seat, promising he wouldn't let go until I was ready. I'd loved him then. Despite everything that came after the favoritism, the dismissals, the years of being invisible, I'd never stopped loving him. And my attempt to help him, my anonymous support, had painted a target on his back. The medical team, Graham said into the silence. They'll be right there. They can intervene immediately. First sign of trouble, Pierce confirmed. We're not going to let anything happen to him. I promise you that. I looked at Monica, at Graham, at Catherine's tired face on the screen. Do it, I heard myself say. But if anything happens to him, it won't, Pierce said firmly. You have my word. The next 90 minutes were a blur of activity. Hospital security cleared the adjacent room. Technical specialists wired Kenneth's room with cameras, 3 angles all hidden. Audio equipment sensitive enough to pick up a whisper. The nurses on Kenneth's floor were briefed federal operation follow Agent Pierce's directions. Maintain normal routines. Kenneth remained unconscious through all of it. His face pale against the hospital pillows, completely unaware that he was about to become the centerpiece of a sting operation. At 7 a.m., the protective order was officially lifted. A nurse called Miranda's cell phone. Ms. Ashford. This is Savannah Memorial. I'm calling to let you know the restrictions have been lifted. You're welcome to visit Mr. Cooper now. I stood in the monitoring room with Pierce, Monica, and 3 other FBI agents I hadn't been introduced to. Screens showed Kenneth's room from multiple angles. Audio equipment sat ready. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "She'll come," Pierce said. "She needs to. The wedding's supposed to be in 7 hours. He's a loose end now." At 7:23 a.m., Miranda appeared on the camera feed. She walked down the hospital corridor like she was approaching a funeral, slow, devastated tissues clutched in one hand. Her other hand gripped her purse tightly. Pierce's voice came through my earpiece, calm and professional. "She's carrying something. Everyone get ready. Before I show you what happened in that hospital room, and trust me, you need to see this pause for just 5 seconds. If you've been holding your breath through this story, drop a comment right now, I'm ready. Let me see how many of you are still with me, because what comes next changes everything." I watched it happen on 3 different camera angles in the monitoring room. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat, each beat a countdown to something irreversible. Graham stood behind me, one hand on my shoulder, an anchor keeping me grounded when every instinct screamed to burst into that room and stop this before it started. Monica sat beside me with her laptop, open fingers poised over the keyboard to document everything with legal precision. Agent Pierce wore a headset, her hand hovering over the radio transmitter, eyes locked on the center screen. The monitoring room was small, claustrophobic. Medical equipment hummed. The air smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. 3 screens glowed in the dim light, 3 angles on Kenneth's hospital room, 3 ways to watch my brother become bait. On the center screen, Miranda entered Kenneth's room at 7:28 a.m. She was wearing the same clothes from last night, designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, pearls at her throat. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, minimal makeup. She looked exhausted, which made sense. She'd spent the night at the police station being questioned about the jewelry incident before being released on her own recognizance. That had been the calculated risk. Let her go knowing she'd be desperate. Knowing the walls were closing in, knowing Kenneth's arsenic test results would come back soon and trace everything to her. A cornered predator was the most dangerous kind, but also the most predictable. Nurse Rebecca, actually Agent Megan Thompson, who'd been posing as hospital staff for the past hour, sat at the computer station near the window reviewing charts on the medical system. She looked up when Miranda entered, her expression professionally neutral. "Good morning," Rebecca said. "You're here early." "I couldn't sleep." Miranda's voice was soft, vulnerable. "I needed to be with him." She approached Kenneth's bed, and her performance was flawless. The perfect picture of a concerned fiancé, one hand reaching out to touch his face, the other clutching her purse against her chest like it contained everything precious to her. Which in a way it did. "Hey baby, it's me," she whispered, leaning close to his ear. "I'm here now. Everything's going to be okay." Kenneth didn't respond. He was still unconscious, his face pale and waxy against the white pillows, dark circles under his eyes. The IV drip continued its steady rhythm, saline and vitamins, nothing more. We'd cleared every medication with the medical team, nothing that could be tampered with, nothing that could hurt him if things went wrong. Please don't let things go wrong. Miranda checked the heart monitor, frowning slightly at the numbers. Then she glanced at Nurse Rebecca, and her expression shifted just a flicker of calculation before the mask settled back into place. "Would you mind giving us just a minute of privacy?" Her smile was sweet, apologetic, with just a hint of embarrassment. I need to say some things to him, alone, personal things." Rebecca hesitated exactly as we'd rehearsed. She glanced at the monitors, then at Kenneth, then back to Miranda. "I really should stay to monitor his vitals. He's still in critical... Please." Miranda's eyes welled with tears on command, her voice breaking on the word. One hand pressed to her mouth. "Just 2 minutes, that's all I'm asking. I need to tell him. In case he doesn't..." She couldn't finish the sentence, letting the implication hang. Oscar-worthy, I thought bitterly. Rebecca stood slowly, gathering her tablet. "I'll step just outside, but only briefly. Hospital policy." "Thank you," Miranda breathed. "Thank you so much." Rebecca walked toward the door, moving with deliberate slowness. She paused at the threshold, glancing back one more time, as if checking Kenneth's vitals from a distance. Then she stepped into the hallway, making sure the door didn't close all the way. It stayed open about 2 inches. Just enough for the hallway camera to capture a slice of the room. Just enough to not be suspicious. In the monitoring room, Agent Pierce leaned forward. "Here we go." The moment Rebecca disappeared from view, Miranda's entire demeanor changed. It was like watching someone flip a switch. The tears vanished. The trembling lips stilled. The sweet, devoted smile dropped away. What remained was cold, clinical calculation. She straightened, pulling her shoulders back, checked her watch, glanced at the door to confirm Rebecca was gone. Then she moved quickly, efficiently to the chair where she'd left her purse. "Jesus," Graham whispered behind me. "Look at her face." He was right. The transformation was complete. This wasn't the Miranda who'd charmed Kenneth at some charity gala. This wasn't the blushing bride-to-be who'd cried over wedding cake tastings. This was Tracy Dunlap, the woman who'd done this 4 times before, who'd perfected her craft over 8 years and $11 million. Who knew exactly what she was doing? She unzipped her purse with practiced ease and pulled out a syringe. 10 milliliters, the plunger already loaded with clear liquid. Even through the grainy camera feed, I could see her fingers were steady. No hesitation, no remorse. "I'm sorry, Kenneth," she said quietly, her voice flat and emotionless as she uncapped the needle. "But you know too much now. The hospital, the tests, the arsenic results, it's all going to lead back to me eventually." She examined the syringe, holding it up to the light, checking for air bubbles with the casual competence of someone who'd done this before. "And your sister." Her voice-hardened lips curling with pure hatred. "God, your sister. She's going to ruin everything. Everything I've worked for. Everything I've built over the last 8 years." She took a step toward Kenneth's bedside, then another. The syringe caught the fluorescent light liquid gleaming. "So this ends today. Right now. A tragic complication from the poisoning. Cardiac arrest. Such a shame." Her tone was almost conversational now, like she was discussing the weather. "You survived the arsenic, but your heart was just too weak. The doctors did everything they could. So sad. So unexpected." She reached for the IV port, the injection site where medications entered the line directly. "By the time anyone figures out what happened, I'll be gone. Preston has the tickets. Costa Rica by tonight, new identities by tomorrow. And all that money." She smiled. $7 million. Maybe more with the double indemnity clause. In the monitoring room, I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled. Everything reduced to that syringe, those steady hands, the clear liquid that would stop Kenneth's heart in seconds. "Oh my God," I whispered. "She's really going to do it." "Not on my watch." Agent Pierce's hand moved to the radio. Her voice was calm, professional, but I saw her jaw clench. "All units go now." On screen, Miranda positioned the syringe at the IV injection port with the precision of someone who'd practiced this. Her left hand steadied the IV line. Her right hand held the syringe at a perfect angle. Her thumb pressed down slowly on the plunger, forcing the liquid toward the needle tip. She was 2 seconds from injecting when the door slammed open with explosive force. FBI dropped the syringe. Agent Pierce and 2 other agents burst into the room, weapons drawn but pointed safely at the floor. Their voices overlapped. "Hands up. Step away from the patient. Drop it now." Miranda froze. Actually froze like someone had pressed pause. The needle was maybe 2 inches from the IV port, her thumb still on the plunger, maybe a quarter of the way down. Time stretched impossibly long. For 1 crystalline second, everything stopped. Then Miranda's head turned slowly, deliberately toward the camera mounted on the wall above the door. Her eyes found the lens, found me somehow, even though she couldn't possibly see through it. Recognition flooded her face. Not fear, not shame or regret or anything human. Pure incandescent rage. "You—" She started, her voice rising to a shriek. "You bitch!" "Drop the syringe," Pierce commanded, moving closer. "Last warning." Miranda's face twisted into something feral. For a moment, I thought she was going to inject Kenneth anyway, finish what she'd started, damn the consequences. Her hand twitched toward the IV port. Then she threw the syringe. Not down, not away. She hurled it toward the floor with vicious force, trying to shatter it, destroy the evidence. But one of the agents, a younger man, reflexes sharp, lunged forward and caught it mid-air in a gloved hand, securing the evidence before it could break. "Got it," he called out, holding the syringe carefully. Intact. Then Miranda ran. It was pointless, 3 FBI agents in a hospital room with one exit, but she tried anyway. Pure animal panic overriding logic. She made it maybe 3 steps before Agent Pierce moved with surprising speed and tackled her from behind, bringing her down hard onto the linoleum floor. Miranda screamed a sound of rage and frustration more than pain. She thrashed like something wild, kicking out, trying to bite. The 2 other agents moved in immediately, each grabbing an arm, forcing her hands behind her back, while Pierce produced handcuffs. "You can't prove anything," Miranda shrieked, her voice cracking. "I didn't do anything, I was just checking his IV. I wasn't, you can't—" Agent Pierce pulled her to her feet with practiced efficiency, snapping the handcuffs closed with 2 decisive clicks. "We just did. Attempted fatal harm caught on video." She nodded to the agent holding the syringe. "And we have the weapon. Full syringe cap removed, positioned at the IV injection port." She held up an evidence bag. "Preliminary field test indicates potassium chloride, 10 milliliters, administered through an IV line. That dosage causes immediate cardiac arrest. Death in under 2 minutes. Miranda's mask shattered completely. The beautiful bride-to-be, the charming fiancé who'd smiled through cake tastings and dress fittings, disappeared like smoke. What remained was something raw and desperate and dangerous. "It's her fault!" She twisted in the agent's grip, straining toward the camera with such violence one of the agents had to brace his full weight against her. "That bitch, Maureen. She ruined everything." Spittle flew from her mouth. Her face was contorted veins standing out on her neck. He was supposed to be easy, just another stupid man with money and a big ego. But she came back. She investigated. Miranda's voice climbed higher, hysteria bleeding through. 8 years. 8 years of perfect work, and she destroys it in 3 days. Pierce's radio crackled. A male voice, professional, and clipped, "Agent Pierce, we've secured Preston and Helena Ashford at the Magnolia Grand Hotel. They were attempting to flee through the service entrance. We've recovered $43,000 in cash, 3 sets of fake passports, and 2 airline tickets to San Jose, Costa Rica. Departure time 6:45 p.m. today." "Copy that," Pierce said calmly. She turned back to Miranda, or Tracy, or whatever her real name was. "Tracy Dunlap, you're under arrest for attempted fatal harm conspiracy to commit harm, fraud, identity theft, and 5 counts of suspicious circumstances currently under federal investigation. You have the right to remain silent." "I know my fucking rights," Tracy snarled. I stood up. My legs felt like water, shaking, barely supporting my weight. But I made myself walk out of the monitoring room, down the short hallway, and into Kenneth's hospital room. When I entered, Tracy's eyes found me immediately. Locked on with such concentrated hatred, I actually took a physical step back. She lunged toward me. The 2 agents holding her barely managed to keep her restrained. She strained against them with terrifying strength, face purple, tendons standing out. "You think you won?" she screamed at me, voice raw. "You're just like me, just like me. Nobody wanted you either. Your own family treated you like garbage, like you were nothing." The words should have hurt. Maybe yesterday, maybe even an hour ago, they would have cut deep. But standing there watching this woman who'd tried to end my brother's life, who'd destroyed 5 other families, who'd built an entire existence on causing pain. "I wasn't accepted," I said quietly. My voice was steady. "You're right about that. My family pushed me away, made me feel worthless, small, invisible." I stepped closer, meeting her wild eyes directly. "But I didn't become someone who harms others because of it." I kept my voice level, factual. There's a difference between surviving trauma and weaponizing it, between building something despite the pain and destroying lives because of it. I looked at the woman I'd spent 72 sleepless hours investigating, the woman who'd charmed my brother with practiced ease, who'd poisoned him slowly, methodically over weeks, who'd planned his death down to the minute, who'd nearly succeeded. "You had choices," I said. "Every single step of the way you had choices. You chose wrong." "Ma'am," one of the agents said gently, "we need to move her to holding." As they pulled Tracy toward the door, she kept screaming threats, accusations, justifications that made no sense. She promised lawsuits and revenge. She called me names I'd never heard before. Her voice echoed down the hospital corridor, bouncing off sterile walls until the elevator doors finally cut it off, mid-shriek. The silence after was profound. Agent Pierce turned to me, pulling off her tactical vest. Tracy Dunlap, also known as Sandra Mitchell, Miranda Hayes, Celeste Williams, and Adriana Foster. Federal charges include attempted fatal harm conspiracy fraud, identity theft, and 5 open investigations into suspicious circumstances resulting in death. She paused, meeting my eyes. Preston Ashford, conspiracy fraud and accomplice to attempted fatal harm. Helena Ashford, fraud, conspiracy, and accessory. She's already agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. "Is it over?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow. "The arrests are done. The investigations will take months, years, probably. Federal prosecutors in 5 jurisdictions. But the immediate threat..." She nodded. "Yes, it's over." Behind me, I heard movement, a groan, low and confused. I turned. Kenneth's eyes were open, unfocused, blinking slowly against the fluorescent lights. He looked around the room with growing confusion at the FBI agent still present at Agent Pierce, in her tactical gear, at the overturned chair where Tracy had been restrained. At me. His face was still pale, still showing the ravages of arsenic poisoning. But his eyes were clear, alert, alive. "What?" His voice was hoarse from intubation and days of unconsciousness. "What's happening?" He focused on me, and recognition slowly dawned through the fog of medication and confusion. "Maureen," he whispered. "What's going on?" His eyes darted to where Tracy had been minutes before then, back to me. Fear crept into his expression. "Miranda. Where's Miranda? Who are all these people? What?" He tried to sit up. The heart monitor beeped faster. "Kenneth." I moved to his bedside, putting a hand on his shoulder. "You need to stay still. You're okay. You're safe." "Safe from what?" Panic edged his voice. "Maureen, what the hell is happening? Where's my fiancé?" I looked at Agent Pierce. She nodded slightly, permission to explain. I turned back to my brother. "Kenneth," I said gently, "we need to talk." Telling Kenneth the truth was harder than stopping Miranda from harming him. The doctor had left 10 minutes ago after explaining the medical details. Arsenic poisoning, chronic exposure over multiple months, organ damage that would take weeks to heal if it healed completely at all. Kenneth had listened with growing horror, his face getting paler with each word. Now it was my turn. "Kenneth," I said quietly. I was sitting in the chair beside his bed, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. "Miranda poisoned you. She's been doing it for months. And this morning she tried to end your life. That's..." Kenneth shook his head slowly. "That's impossible. She wouldn't..." "She would. She did." I pulled out my phone, opened the file Monica had compiled. 5 men before you: Brandon Mueller, Christopher Daniels, Anthony Russell, Stephen Walsh, Matthew Hendricks. All of them married women who looked different but were the same person. All of them lost their lives within months. All of them had life insurance policies. I handed him the phone. He scrolled through the articles with shaking hands. "This is a serial criminal," I continued. "Miranda Ashford isn't even her real name. It's Tracy Dunlap. She's wanted by the FBI. You were supposed to be victim number 6. Kenneth's face had gone from pale to gray. "But she loved me." The words broke my heart. "She loved your bank account," I said as gently as I could. "What bank account?" Kenneth looked up at me, genuinely confused. "Maureen, I'm not rich. I work at the factory. I make decent money, but nothing like..." He gestured at the hospital room, at the FBI presence still lingering in the hallway. "Nothing that would make me a target for this." This was the part I'd been dreading. "But they thought you were rich," I said. "They saw the paid-off mortgage, Dad's surgery bills covered in full, the consulting income appearing in your account every quarter." Understanding started to dawn in Kenneth's eyes. The financial support over the past 3 years, I said. All of it, every dollar, it was me. Silence, long and heavy. Kenneth's voice was barely a whisper. You paid for everything. Cooper Properties bought the mortgage. Cooper Family Foundation covered the surgery. CH Consulting Group sent the quarterly payments. I met his eyes. It was all me. I set it up to look like you were successful, like our family had money, because I knew Mom and Dad would never accept help from me directly. And Mom thought it was me. Kenneth said slowly. She thought I was some kind of business genius. Yes, and that's why they targeted me. His voice was hollow. Because you were trying to help, and it made me look like I had money I didn't have. Yes. The door opened. Judith and Gerald stepped in their faces, telling me they'd been listening from the hallway. My mother's expression was a mixture of shame and horror I'd never seen before. Maureen, Judith said, her voice shaking, you own hotels. I pulled up my company website on my phone, showed her the CEO profile, the industry awards, the properties listed under Cooper Hospitality Group. But Judith started, then stopped. Just what Mom... I stood up, finally letting years of hurt surface. Just the daughter you threw away, just the girl who wasn't worth your time. Maureen, I tried to tell you, I said. 6 months ago. That video call. I tried to explain what I'd built. You said I was delusional. You said I was making up stories to make myself feel important. Judith's hand went to her mouth. Thanksgiving 2014. I drove 3 hours to Hartwell. You shut the door in my face before I could even say hello. Honey, Christmas 2011. I called from my first apartment. You hung up after 30 seconds, said you had dinner to prepare and I was interrupting. My voice cracked. I hadn't meant to do this. Hadn't meant to lay out every rejection, every wound, but it was pouring out now, unstoppable. So I helped anyway, I said, because you're still my family, because I loved you even when you made it clear you didn't love me back, because I couldn't stand the thought of Dad in pain or you losing the house even if you'd never thank me for it. Judith was crying now, real tears, not the performative kind I'd seen her use so many times. I was wrong, she whispered. God, Maureen, I was so wrong. You were jealous, I said, and watched her flinch. Weren't you? Yes. The word came out broken. You were so determined, so strong. You never needed us the way Kenneth did. He was easy to love, easy to guide. She looked at me with something like fear. You scared me. From the time you were little, you scared me because I knew you'd leave and never look back. I did leave, I said, but I looked back every single day. Gerald stepped forward. My father, who'd been silent through so much of my life, finally spoke. I knew, he said quietly. All these years, I knew we were treating you wrong, but I didn't stop your mother, didn't stand up for you. That makes me just as guilty. His voice roughened. Maureen, I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. I felt Graham's hand on my shoulder. I hadn't even heard him come in. Monica stood in the doorway, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You saved my life, Kenneth said from the bed. His voice was stronger now, clearer. You saved my life after we treated you like you were nothing. He swallowed hard. I don't deserve your help, any of it. Maybe not, I said honestly. But you're still my brother, and I couldn't let you be harmed just to prove a point about how badly you'd all hurt me. A knock at the door interrupted us. Agent Pierce stood in the hallway, her expression serious. Ms. Cooper, we need you to come with us. Tracy Dunlap has requested to make a confession. She paused, but she'll only speak to you. Tracy Dunlap sat in the interrogation room with dried tears and fresh hatred in her eyes. She wore an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed to the table. Without makeup, without the carefully constructed mask of Miranda Ashford, her true face was visible for the first time. She looked older than 30 lines around her eyes, hardness in her jaw, something cold and calculating in the set of her mouth. Monica sat beside me. Agent Pierce stood by the door, arms crossed. A camera in the corner recorded everything. You wanted to talk to me, I said. Why? Tracy leaned back in her chair as much as the handcuffs would allow. You said I weaponized my trauma, that I chose wrong. Her voice was flat, emotionless. You want to understand, I'll tell you. I waited. My real name is Sandra Louise Dunlap, born in Oklahoma, younger sister to Michael Dunlap, the golden child, the heir, the son my parents actually wanted. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. When my father passed away, he left everything to Michael. The farm, $2 million worth of land. You know what he left me? Zero. The will said daughters don't need inheritance because we'll just marry and become our husband's responsibility. I felt Monica tense beside me. I was 22 when Michael had his accident. Tractor rolled. A real accident. I had nothing to do with that one. Tracy's voice was matter of fact. The farm got sold. $2.3 million went to his widow, a woman he'd been married to 8 months. I got nothing. Again. That's when I realized something. Marriage is a weapon. Insurance is a business. And men who inherit everything without earning it don't deserve to keep it. So you became strategic? Tracy interrupted. The first one was David Michael's best friend. He had a $400,000 policy. It was easy. Men like that are desperate for someone to see them as special. My stomach turned. You caused his ending, I said carefully. I gave him what he wanted first. He was happy. Tracy shrugged, and I got what I was owed, what my father should have left me, what society says I don't deserve just because I was born female. Men get everything. She continued, her voice rising. Money, power, respect. I just collect what they'd waste anyway. None of them were innocent. They all had huge egos. I gave them what they wanted, someone who made them feel special. They paid the price. And Kenneth, I asked. Tracy's face twisted. He should have been easy, weak, desperate, perfect target. She leaned forward. Then you appeared, with your secret empire and your resources. You ruined everything. I saved my brother's life. You got lucky, Tracy spat. We're not so different, you and me. Both ignored daughters. Both pushed aside for golden boy brothers. Both told we weren't good enough. We are different, I said firmly. I was hurt. You became a predator. I built something. You destroyed 5 families. Trauma made me stronger. Yours made you dangerous. That's the difference. Tracy laughed, harsh and bitter. The families of those 5 men will call you a hero. But you know what, you really are lucky. You had money to fight back, resources, power. She leaned forward. What about all the girls who don't? The ones who get nothing, who are told they're worth nothing, who don't have millions of dollars to prove everyone wrong? What happens to them? The question hung in the air. I'll make sure there's help for them, I said. The Cooper Family Foundation will fund scholarships, support programs, resources for young women escaping difficult situations. They'll have real chances. I met her eyes. Unlike you, they'll choose to build instead of destroy. Agent Pierce stepped forward. That's enough. Sandra Louise Dunlap, you're being charged with 5 counts of causing the ending of life, 1 count of attempted harm, insurance fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Multiple jurisdictions are filing additional charges. Tracy smiled. See you in 25 years, Maureen. They took her away. I sat in that interrogation room for another 10 minutes, staring at the empty chair across from me, trying to process everything I'd heard. Monica's hand found mine. You okay? She asked quietly. No, I said honestly, but I will be. By the time we left the police station, the sun was setting over Savannah. Monica drove me back to the Magnolia Grand in silence, both of us too exhausted for conversation. The Spanish moss hung heavy from the oak trees lining the streets, and the evening light turned everything golden. When we pulled into the hotel parking lot, I saw the crowd in the ballroom through the windows. Graham had texted me an hour ago. Guests are still here. They want answers. You ready? I wasn't. But I walked into that ballroom anyway. The same room where Miranda had spilled wine on me, where Kenneth had dismissed me, where I'd been humiliated in front of people I'd once hoped would accept me. Now it was full again, guests who'd stayed in town, drawn by rumors and news alerts, unsure what was happening, but unable to leave without knowing the truth. I walked to the front of the room. Graham had set up a microphone. The conversations died down as people noticed me. "Thank you all for staying," I said. My voice echoed through the space. "I know the past day has been confusing. The wedding tomorrow won't be happening. Kenneth is safe and recovering in the hospital. The woman you knew as Miranda Ashford has been arrested by the FBI. I pulled up the news on the projection screen behind me. Headlines filled the wall. Serial offender arrested in Georgia. FBI confirms 5 cases resolved, 6th target saved by resilient sister. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" "Everything you need to know is in the official FBI statements," I said. "Kenneth is grateful for your well wishes and support. The Magnolia Grand will cover accommodation for anyone who needs to stay another night." I started to step away from the microphone, exhausted and ready to finally sleep, but a voice stopped me. "Wait," Judith stood up from her seat near the back. "I want to say something." The room went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. My mother walked to the front, slowly, her face pale but determined. When she reached the microphone, she turned to face the crowd, then looked directly at me, my daughter Maureen. Judith's voice shook. "Saved her brother's life yesterday. She built an empire I didn't know existed. She accomplished things I never imagined possible." Her voice broke. "And she did it all while I treated her like she didn't matter. She's a better person than I ever thought she could be. Better than I deserved." Applause started, genuine, warm, not polite clapping, but real appreciation. I felt tears sting my eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. It wasn't triumph I felt standing there. It was bone-deep exhaustion, relief that Kenneth was alive, grief for 5 men who hadn't been saved because I hadn't known in time, and determination, fierce, unwavering determination to do better, to help the girls Tracy had asked about, the ones without money or resources or someone to fight for them. The news broke across every major outlet that evening. My phone started ringing before I even left the ballroom. Reporters' old business school classmates, contacts I hadn't heard from in years, all wanting the story, wanting a piece of what had happened. I ignored all of them, because there was only one call I wanted to make. 3 weeks after the arrest, I sat across from Kenneth at a diner in Hartwell, the same diner where I'd spent 3 years watching my family through the window. The vinyl booths were cracked, the coffee was weak, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. But it was neutral ground, not my hotel, not their house, somewhere in between. Kenneth looked different. Thinner, he'd lost 30 pounds from the arsenic, and his face still had that gaunt quality of someone recovering from long illness. But his color was better. His hair was growing back where it had started to thin, and his eyes, when he looked at me, held something I'd never seen before: humility. "The trial updates came through yesterday," I said, stirring my coffee. "Tracy's being charged in 5 different jurisdictions, $11.4 million in fraud across all the cases. The prosecutors are confident she'll get life without parole." Kenneth nodded slowly. "The families of those who lost their lives, do they know?" "They know. Agent Pierce has been coordinating with all of them. They're finally getting justice." I paused. "The press is calling it the dangerous criminal case that was solved." "And calling you a hero." I grimaced. The media attention had been overwhelming. Hotel CEO stops brother from being harmed had been the headline across every major outlet. Business at all 5 properties was booming. Apparently people wanted to stay at hotels owned by someone who'd caught a notorious criminal. But success felt hollow when I was too exhausted to enjoy it. "Your therapist," I said, changing the subject. "How's that going?" Kenneth's hand tightened around his coffee mug. "She says I'm easily manipulated, that I was conditioned to seek approval, specifically Mom's approval, to the point where I'd believe anything from someone who gave me attention." He looked down. "The arsenic made me weak. Lost 30 pounds. I'm still recovering. Hair's finally growing back." I noticed. "She also said," he hesitated, "she said I need to understand what I did to you, not just apologize, actually understand it." I waited. Kenneth looked around the diner, his gaze landing on the corner booth by the window. "This is where you sat, isn't it? Where you watched us, I felt my breath catch. How did you know about that? Agent Pierce mentioned it when she was interviewing me, about the financial support you'd been providing. His voice was quiet. She said you came here monthly for 3 years, sat in that booth, watched our house through the window like you weren't allowed to come inside. Tears I hadn't expected burned behind my eyes. God, Maureen, Kenneth's voice broke. I'm so sorry. For everything. For dismissing you at the party. For believing Miranda over you. For 30 years of making you feel invisible. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I'm so goddamn sorry. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand once, then pulled back. I appreciate the apology, I said. I do, but it doesn't fix the past 30 years. We have a lot of work to do, Kenneth. A lot of rebuilding. And I need you to know I'm not sure what our relationship will look like when we're done. If we're done. I know. He wiped his face with a napkin. I know, and I'll try. I promise I'll try. We sat in silence for a moment. The waitress refilled our coffee. Outside, Hartwell moved at its slow, steady pace. Mom's in therapy too, Kenneth said finally. Twice a week. The therapist is making her address the favoritism, the jealousy, the control issues. Has she called you? She's called 3 times in the past 2 weeks. I answered once. I took a sip of coffee. She's writing me a letter. Therapist's assignment. Dad's different too, Kenneth added. He's standing up to her. Told me last week that he'd enabled her for 40 years and he wasn't going to be silent anymore. He started woodworking again. Did you know he used to make furniture? I shook my head. There was so much about my father I'd never known. He wants to make you something, Kenneth said. For your office, if you'd accept it. Maybe, I said, someday. The dinner invitation had come from Gerald 2 days ago. First family dinner in 10 years. I'd almost said no. But Graham had encouraged me to go, and Monica had reminded me that healing required showing up even when it was uncomfortable. So that evening, I drove to the house on Elm Street with Graham in the passenger seat. He'd insisted on coming for moral support, and I was grateful. The house looked the same from the outside. White siding, black shutters, the oak tree in the front yard that Kenneth and I used to climb as kids. But walking through that front door felt like entering foreign territory. Dinner was awkward. Painfully, excruciatingly awkward. Long silences punctuated by careful small talk. Everyone moving around each other like we were afraid of collision. But everyone was there, and everyone was trying. Gerald had cooked meatballs, his specialty, the one thing I remembered loving as a kid. The fact that he remembered felt significant. Judith had made sides and set the table without a single critical comment about how I was dressed or whether I'd brought the right wine. Small victories. Maureen. Gerald said halfway through the meal, "The hotels you built, do you have pictures?" I pulled out my phone, showed him photos of the Magnolia Grand, the Augusta House, the others. He scrolled through them, slowly, his calloused fingers careful on the screen. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "I should have told you that years ago, decades ago." He looked up at me. "I'm proud of what you've built, who you've become, despite us." The words hit harder than I'd expected. "Can I visit sometime?" Kenneth asked. "See the Magnolia Grand in person?" "Maybe," I said. "Someday when we're both ready." Judith was quiet through most of the meal, but as we were clearing plates, she caught my arm. "I know I can't fix what I broke," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. "But I want you to know I see you now. I see how strong you are, how determined, how successful. I see how wrong I was about you." She swallowed hard. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," I said, not cruel, just honest. "Because it's going to take time." "I know." The evening ended with awkward hugs. Gerald's lasted a few seconds longer than I expected. Judith's was stiff but genuine. Kenneth held on tight enough that I felt his ribs through his shirt still too thin, still recovering. As Graham and I drove back to Savannah, the highway dark and empty, I felt something I hadn't felt in years when thinking about my family hope. Not certainty, not trust, but hope. My phone buzzed as we crossed the city limits. A text from Kenneth. "Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave up on you." I stared at the message for a long moment. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. But I wasn't ready to respond yet. Wasn't sure what to say that wouldn't be too much or too little, so I saved the message instead. That was enough for now. The business breakfast was my idea, but the defining moment wasn't mine to plan. 4 weeks had passed since Tracy Dunlap's arrest. 4 weeks of media coverage, legal proceedings, and watching my business explode in ways I'd never anticipated. The headline that morning read, "Hotel CEO who stopped dangerous criminal expands empire, 3 new properties planned." I stood in the restaurant at the Magnolia Grand watching my staff prepare for the investor breakfast I'd organized. Expansion plans for Charleston, a new property in Atlanta, partnerships with hospitality groups that had once refused to take my calls. This was my hotel, my empire, built from $350 and stubbornness. The necklace rested against my collarbone. Grandma Frances's necklace, the one Judith had given to Miranda. The one Kenneth had quietly returned to me 2 weeks ago with a note that said simply, "This was always yours." I wore it today deliberately, a reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd reclaimed. The breakfast crowd filtered in, investors in tailored suits, hotel executives, industry veterans who'd watched my rise with varying degrees of surprise and respect. Edward Livingston arrived fashionably late, as always, his booming voice carrying across the room as he greeted colleagues. I was reviewing the Charleston proposal with Graham when I saw her. Lily Thompson stood in the doorway, 20 years old and visibly uncomfortable. She wore simple slacks and a blouse that looked new but inexpensive. Her posture screamed, "I don't belong here," and I recognized it immediately because I'd worn that same posture at her age. Lily was this year's Cooper Hospitality Scholarship recipient, first-generation college student from a town of 800 people in rural Georgia. She'd worked 2 jobs to afford community college and was about to start the hotel management program at Cornell in January, full ride, all expenses paid, courtesy of the foundation I'd established after Tracy's arrest. I watched her scan the room looking for me, trying to figure out where she was supposed to go. And then I heard Edward Livingston's voice loud enough to carry. "Who let this girl in here?" He was talking to his colleague but making no effort to lower his voice. "This is a private event. She looks like she wandered in from the street." The room didn't quite go silent, but several conversations paused. I saw Lily's face flush red. I stood up immediately. "Lily." I crossed the room in seconds, my heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor. "I'm so glad you could make it." I said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Then I turned to face the room, one hand on Lily's shoulder. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Lily Thompson, this year's Cooper Hotel Scholarship recipient." I looked directly at Edward. Lily grew up in a town of 800 people. She worked 2 jobs to put herself through community college. She starts Cornell's hotel management program in January, full ride, because talent doesn't care where you're from. Lily's eyes were wide, but I kept going. The Cooper Group was built by someone who was constantly underestimated, someone who was told she'd never amount to anything, someone who proved every single one of them wrong. I paused, letting that sink in. This scholarship exists to make sure that other young women, other people who start with nothing but dreams and determination, get the same chance. I looked at Lily, smiled warmly. "Welcome, Lily. There's always a seat for you at my table." The room erupted in polite applause. Edward Livingston's face had gone an interesting shade of red. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Miss Cooper. This means everything to me." "Don't thank me yet," I said, guiding her to the empty chair beside me. "The real work is just starting." As we sat down, I leaned in and whispered, "If you ever feel like you don't belong somewhere, remember this. The people who build beautiful things often start with nothing but stubbornness and dreams. You have both." After the presentations, after the Charleston projections, and the Atlanta timelines, and the partnership proposals, Edward Livingston approached me. "Ms. Cooper," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "I'd like to apologize." "Don't apologize to me," I said. "Apologize to her." He turned to Lily, who was reviewing property photos with Graham. "Miss Thompson, I'm sorry. That comment was rude and uncalled for." Lily nodded, accepting it with more grace than he deserved. I waited until she turned back to Graham before I spoke again. "Edward, you're no longer invited to invest in the Charleston project." His eyes widened. Miss Cooper, surely— "The meeting's over," I said. "Graham will show you out." As the breakfast wound down and guests filtered out, Lily lingered. "How did you do it?" she asked. We were standing by the windows overlooking the historic district's Spanish moss hanging from oak trees in the morning light. "How did you keep going when people kept saying you couldn't—" I touched the necklace at my throat. "This belonged to my grandmother. She gave it to me when I was 18, told me I was a dreamer and a fighter." I smiled, but it hurt a little. For years, my family took it from me, gave it to someone else, someone they thought deserved it more. "But you got it back." "I got it back," I confirmed. "Not because I demanded it, because I earned it, because I built something so undeniable that even they couldn't pretend I didn't matter anymore." I turned to face her fully. "You keep going by building something they can't take away. Education, skills, success. Make yourself so competent, so capable that their opinions become irrelevant." Lily nodded, processing this. "And remember," I added, "while they're busy looking down on you for where you came from, they won't see you rising. That's their mistake, not yours." After she left, I stood alone in the lobby of the Magnolia Grand, watching guests check in and out, watching business travelers and tourists move through the space I'd created. Every tile on this floor, every chandelier, every carefully chosen piece of art mine. Built by me, owned by me. People will try to make you feel small because of where you're from. Let them. While they're looking down, they won't see you climbing. I'd learned that lesson in Hartwell, where I was never enough. I'd carried it through the lean years, the doubt, the nights when I thought I'd never make it. And now I stood here in my hotel, surrounded by everything I'd built, and I finally understood what my grandmother had meant. Being a dreamer and a fighter meant you'd get knocked down, but it also meant you'd get back up, every single time. Thanksgiving had happened last week. Still awkward, still careful, but real. Kenneth was 6 weeks sober, attending AA meetings, slowly gaining back the weight he'd lost. Judith had sent me a handwritten letter, 12 pages of accountability and apology, and recognition that I didn't owe her forgiveness. Gerald called every Sunday now, the first consistent contact we'd had in 13 years. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Tracy Dunlap's trial was scheduled for March. The families of those who'd lost their lives were finally finding closure. I'd agreed to testify when the time came, but it wasn't my focus anymore. She'd taken enough of my energy. Graham appeared at my elbow. "Ready for the Charleston site visit tomorrow?" "Absolutely," I said. "Let's go build something beautiful." He grinned. "That's what we do best." I looked around the Magnolia Grand one more time at the lobby I'd designed, the staff I'd hired. The business I'd built from nothing but $350 and a refusal to accept what everyone said I could never do. They called me the trailer park girl who'd never succeed. I called it motivation, and now I call it the Cooper Hospitality Group, because the sweetest revenge isn't making noise. It's not public confrontations or proving people wrong in dramatic showdowns. It's what you build when they're not watching, one hotel at a time. When I look back at my story, from sleeping on an air mattress in a studio apartment to building a multi-million-dollar hotel empire, from being the rejected daughter to the woman who saved her brother's life, I see that this journey was never just about success or family revenge. It was about choosing who I would become when pain tried to define me. I'm not sharing this so you'll follow my path. I hope you never have to walk it. But if you've been ignored by relatives, underestimated, or made to feel invisible, let me share what I learned, lessons earned through struggle, loss, and hard growth. Lesson 1. Family betrayal does not define your worth. For years, I believed that if my parents withheld love, something had to be wrong with me. I was mistaken. Their actions reflected fear, favoritism, and wounded pride, not my value. God creates each of us with purpose, and sometimes that purpose doesn't align with family expectations. Different doesn't mean lesser. It means you are built for another road. Lesson 2. Build, don't destroy. Tracy Dunlap, the woman who nearly ended my brother's life, also knew rejection and pain, but she chose to weaponize it. I understand the temptation for family revenge. There were nights I wanted to prove everyone wrong in the most painful way possible. That kind of revenge never heals. It only spreads harm. Instead, I built businesses, created jobs, and invested in people who needed belief more than judgment. I turned pain into purpose. Lesson 3. You can't save people who refuse to change. I saved Kenneth from Tracy's influence, but I couldn't save him from his own choices or his silence over 30 years. Healing must be chosen. You can open a door, but others must walk through it willingly. Lesson 4. Forgiveness is not forgetting. I forgave my parents not because they earned it, but because I deserved peace. Forgiveness doesn't require restoring old dynamics. I set boundaries. I love from a safe distance. God does not ask us to endure harm in the name of loyalty. Lesson 5. Family betrayal can reveal strength you never knew you had. If I had been protected and nurtured, I might never have left Hartwell or built anything alone. Pain forced resilience. Loneliness taught self-reliance. Pain isn't good, but it doesn't have to be the end. It can become the beginning of something stronger. Lesson 6. Become the person you once needed. Graham believed in me when no one else did. He stood beside me when telling the truth meant losing everything. Now I try to be that person for others, for Lily, for my employees, for anyone who feels unseen, because everyone deserves someone who believes in them. Lesson 7. Don't let family betrayal turn you into someone cold or cruel. Don't let it steal your kindness or shape your heart around bitterness. Choose something better. Build something meaningful. God never wastes suffering if we allow Him to shape it into purpose. Lesson 8. Success born from pain requires boundaries. I didn't just build hotels, I built protection around my peace. Not everyone deserves access to your life, even if they share your DNA. Loving from a distance can be wisdom, not weakness. Lesson 9. Your story isn't finished. 3 weeks ago, I watched my brother nearly die. Today, he's in therapy. My mother is confronting her patterns. My father builds furniture for my office, his quiet apology. It's imperfect, but it's movement forward. Finally, choose your legacy carefully. Some people choose destruction. I choose to build lives and opportunities. I want to be remembered as someone who was hurt but didn't hurt, back rejected but still compassionate. That kind of family revenge heals by refusing to repeat the damage and by choosing kindness over resentment for generations. If this story touched you, please leave a comment and share your experience. You are not alone. Share this video with someone who may need it and subscribe for more stories about resilience, forgiveness, and hope. Thank you for staying until the end. The next story includes some fictionalized elements for educational purposes. If you prefer not to continue, feel free to choose content that suits you better. For you.